Boy, I sure hope this beer doesn't have in it the substance.
Welcome to Green Takes, everyone.
I don't think we've ever walked out of the theater together and not known what to say.
No, we watched some messed up stuff on this program. This was
This was up there.
this was messed up.
Well, the funny thing is, this is Green Takes. Hello, everyone. This is Green Takes. And
Hi.
Green Takes, we go to the movie, we watch it, we come home, we're giving you our fresh and green takes right now, right off the cuff.
I bought a ticket. I got popcorn breath. And my feet are sticky.
Yep.
It's everyone loves it.
Everyone loves it. And we have to, awkwardly not talk about the movie on the drive home. This was tough to not talk about.
It's a tough movie to not talk about. It's also a pretty tough movie to talk about.
Yeah.
So we watched The Substance.
The Substance.
Have you ever dreamt of a better version of yourself? Younger, more beautiful, more perfect.
So The Substance, I guess for anyone who doesn't know, we'll do spoiler free to start. The Substance is about an aging movie star played by Demi Moore. She is kind of being pushed out of Hollywood. She's aging out. The show doesn't want her anymore. She's getting too old, and she gets a mysterious call for something called the Substance, a thing that you inject yourself with that splits you in two and gives you a younger version of yourself that you need to coexist with so that you can kind of relive your youth.
One single injection unlocks your DNA and will release another version of yourself.
Okay, well, let's start here. What did you think about this movie, Avery?
I loved it. I thought this movie was completely brilliant. I mean, obviously it's horrifying, but this movie did so many things so well and was so well constructed. And honestly, going in, I mean, we do these on weeknights. We have to see the movie and come like after a work day. I was like, oh, it's 2 hours and 40 minutes. Like, ugh, flew by.
I did not know it was that long.
Oh my God, like it was, that was the most like locked in and riveted I can remember being with a movie for a very long time. And it's mostly just like holding on close-ups of people.
Yep.
I mean, I can gush about some of the technical aspects, but I think I'll just start there that I thought this was, I loved it and I thought it was just stunningly good.
I think I can go up to love it. I at least really, really liked it. This movie's crazy. This is a pretty tailor-made movie for me. I love body horror movies in general. Actually, starting with David Cronenberg's The Fly. That probably was my first body horror movie as a young lad, and it kicked off a fascination with it for life.
There you go.
I loved this. Performances are great. The technical filmmaking's great. The creature makeup is great. It's a good soundtrack.
Ends well.
It's got a good ending. There's a lot of great theme work. It doesn't overstay its welcome. If you asked me to guess how long this was, I would have guessed under 2 hours. I'm shocked it's 2 hours and 40 or whatever it actually is.
It's long.
Because it didn't feel like that. This thing whizzed by.
This is The Substance.
One thing I'll say about this movie is it did feel like it had a very female perspective. Mm-hmm. It did. It dealt with a lot of like, I mean, obviously it's about an aging Hollywood star. And I think a lot of it was, and we just watched another movie that was, help me out, that with Pearl and X. We talked about how that's a horror movie that's very centered around kind of the female experience, the female perspective, and it's more a horror movie aimed that way. And we can appreciate it without it being for us. This, I felt again very much that way about this. Not that I couldn't engage with it, but I thought it was really interesting to see like this messed up of a horror movie that went this far, but that did feel very authentically like the female experience. It was cool.
Absolutely. It definitely puts you in their shoes.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we start with that. It tackles themes of aging, right? Fear of aging, which is not new to body horror. That's probably, if anything, that was something I was apprehensive going into the movie, is that I know it's a body horror film, and I know it's about an aging star. So I know it's going to be body horror about her trying to make herself younger, and it goes wrong.
Yeah.
And I think going in knowing that, I was almost like, is that too much to know? Is that already, because it's kind of like, if it just plays that out, I can kind of already guess where it's going to go with that. I don't feel like I need to see that. But in the presentation of it, it goes it does so much with it that even though at a surface level reading that, you're like, I get it. Do I really need to see it to get that told to me? It takes it so far down that rabbit hole that it almost brings new meaning to it.
For
it like
sure.
reinvigorates a tired concept by making it so fresh.
You're hired.
Let's go.
I thought the tone was just fascinating. It really wove a lot of very distinct tones through this movie. It was genuinely really funny. at points.
Hilarious.
Like brilliantly funny. It was like biting satire. It was thrilling. Like there were moments where I was genuinely like I could feel my heart racing. Like several of them.
Yeah, like we're just both, you and I are just sitting in the theater together, just like watching the screen. I could just see you next to me, like having the same reaction.
And just for a film like this that goes this far on the body horror, like that's something we talked about again with When Evil Lurks, is that it was so horrific, but I thought it ended up a little one note for that, where I didn't feel like there was much of a movie around how gross it was. I liked it, right? But like that movie wasn't funny.
No.
And like if that movie had successfully pulled off comedy and maintained how like that, but that's what this did. The Substance did do that.
It's very funny.
Yeah.
Which was the biggest surprise of the movie for me. I think the body horror stuff executed as I expected and better than I expected. The comedy I didn't know was in this movie at all. Dennis Quaid is in this movie and he's hilarious.
He's playing a Hollywood producer man whose name is literally just Harvey.
Yep.
They just did that.
And he's hilarious.
Like his first scene is him eating shrimp like Denethor eating tomatoes. It's...
The way comedy's woven in was really appreciated because it is like, this could be exhausting otherwise because
Yeah.
it's so gross and it's so intense.
You said coming out, it felt like a roller coaster ride, and this really was like okay, we just got through a absolutely disgusting and upsetting body horror scene, and now it's just Dennis Quaid being goofy.
Yeah, and like even the finale, which I won't spoil,
No.
is equal parts disgusting and funny.
Yeah.
I was laughing almost the entire
It
climax.
felt like a payoff of everything.
Yeah.
Like, this was a brilliant last 10 minutes that took it from like a really good to an amazing movie for me.
Look, clearly we both really liked it.
Yeah.
You should check it out. I think we kind of just need to go into spoilers. I don't really want to dance around it too much more.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, I did want to talk about it without. I do absolutely think that people, if you have any interest in this and you think you can make it through the most disgusting film I've seen in quite some time, watch it unspoiled. But otherwise, let's get into spoilers.
Do some spoil. We're opening it up to potential spoilers now.
Yeah.
Would you like to stop? Would you like to stop? Would you like to stop? Would you like to stop?
Literal plot, she injects the substance, births a younger version of herself out of her spine.
Yep.
I expected the aging actress theme, because that's obviously what it's about. From the poster, you get that.
Yeah.
What I didn't expect thematically, and I don't know if you were kind of reading into this the way I was, the entire second act to me was about like motherhood.
Yes, I was absolutely thinking this.
Okay.
A perfect balance of 7 days each. The one and only thing not to forget. You are one.
It felt more about motherhood and parenthood than even the stardom part for the whole middle part of the movie, where it is more about the relationship of a younger version of yourself stealing your youth and the balance between that. Because that doesn't really adhere to stardom. Stardom doesn't have that allegory of like a younger version of yourself you're splitting time with. Motherhood does. And when her finger aged to a 90-year-old woman's because her daughter stayed out too late, because the younger version of herself stayed out too late partying, getting drunk, it literally aged her. I was like, oh, there's a whole motherhood thing going on here that I did not expect, and I loved that.
I agree, and especially with the literal birthing. I mean,
Yep.
and there's a lot of breasts in this movie.
lot of
and
boobs.
Like, not just gratuitous. We'll talk about some of that stuff, but I agree. But I don't think it's. I think you could interpret this as purely a. I think it really blurred the line between the mother and daughter relationship and just kind of the two versions of yourself relationship.
It did both.
I think you could view this very much as Margaret Qualley is like the version of yourself that's going out and partying and getting drunk, and you're paying for it the next morning. You're hungover, you're miserable, you're binging, you're self-loathing. And like, I think, again, it is both. It worked as that's your daughter and you're trying to avoid her making the same mistakes, and she's like stressing you out, and she's literally draining the life from you. And it's yourself realizing that you can fake living this lifestyle, but it can't be all of you anymore. That's not all that you are.
There's been a slight misuse of the substance.
I'm really glad you picked up on that part, because I was like, is this just me? Because
No.
there was the scene where the young version wakes up and sees the like dimples in the couch and all the gross food that's been left out earlier on before it goes like full crazy.
Yeah.
And they're just so grossed out. And I was like, this part is beyond gender. This is just you being a dirtbag every other week of your life. And then 1 week you're on and 1 week you're off, which a lot of people are, myself included. You have weeks where you're feeling great and you have weeks where you're not. And even to a lesser extent, kind of like your example, you'll go out on the weekend, you know you have this big plan. You're so excited about it, you're seeing all your friends, and you kind of give yourself all week to do nothing and be gross.
Yeah.
Because you know there's this thing coming up that you're excited for, that's the good version of yourself. You like are a degenerate for 5 days and eat chips on the couch. And I felt like this movie kicked me in the butt. Like I feel like I need to make changes in my life after watching The Substance, because of how hard that message hit home. Again,
We should say real quick that part of the thing is that they have to switch every 7 days.
Yes.
So Margaret Qualley comes out for 7 days, and then Demi Moore is.
yeah. And I didn't expect the motherhood angle. I didn't expect this two sides of yourself where you're disgusted by some aspects of your own personality and behaviors. That was all totally out of left field. So what we were talking about at the beginning of like, it seems like it's going to be a basic theme and you can predict how it plays out. It adds all these layers that gave it so much more going on, and things you can appreciate if you're not a mother, if you're not a woman. There's a lot of themes that transcend well beyond that.
You can't escape from yourself.
I think one of the strongest pieces of this movie was the pacing. This felt just like such a brilliant screenplay, because I mean it was long, but it was used so well. And this is something that I get bugged with almost every movie we watch, is that like my brain just starts nitpicking, and I'm like, you did that one too many times, you hit that beat one too many times, like we're getting a little bit bored. But the way, I mean, there's this cycle within the movie, right? Like 7 days on and off of Margaret Qualley and Demi Moore. And the way that they kind of flip that, and then as soon as my brain understands, like, okay, one of them's gonna push it, immediately it happens, and it's just the right amount, and it like plays around this natural like rhythm that emerges to the movie because of that.
Yeah.
So well, and it uses it so effectively for tension, and it does exactly the right number of cycles before it starts spiraling off.
Yes.
It was so well put together in that aspect.
Yeah, because right when you were like, I get it,
Yeah.
they moved to the next thing.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna be honest, I thought they were out of things. Full spoilers now, when Margaret Qualley's her name, right?
Yeah.
When she kills Demi Moore,
Yeah.
and now she's the only version left, I was like, okay, you know what? That's a good ending. This is a reasonable place to end your movie.
No.
I did not expect Monstro Elisa Sue to be the true third act of the movie. For anyone who's not going to watch this, they go further. She does another activation with the substance and turns into a full-blown movie monster, like a 1950s era Universal monster movie monster.
They go for it.
And I didn't see that coming at all. I literally thought the movie was over. So it's like every time you're getting into that repetition, it throws such a crazy curveball.
And it builds, like, I've talked about the ending. I mean, the climate, I don't want to talk in specifics about the ending, at least not yet, but it was just such an emotional payoff. They just, like, the way that they did the score and the visuals was just, it was so just bombastic and brilliant, and it felt like such an actual earned payoff of everything the movie had been building towards.
It's an emotional payoff. It's also a comedic payoff.
Yeah.
Like when those ladies stood up and started screaming in the theater, I was like fully like cracking up in the movie theater.
Yeah.
While I'm watching like one of the most horrific things I've seen in a horror movie in recent times happening at the exact same moment.
It was wild, and it felt like all this tension just releasing. It was, yeah. You could watch this movie and absolutely think it's exploitative in either direction. There are a lot of shots of Margaret Qualley's ass. Like, there's like 15 minutes of the camera is just holding, like,
I mean, a
there's
lot of the times that it's her perspective, it's shot like a music video.
Yeah.
It's just glamour shots. The music's pumping. It's intentionally.
It is.
That.
If you watch this and come out of it thinking it is a little too self-indulgent and exploitative, I can't disagree. I thought it worked, and it really did do a good job of, because it flipped so hard and went so far. And it was obviously trying to parallel it, right? They have all these shots that are basically just pornography.
Yeah.
For like the first like 30, 40 minutes. And then they go back to the same sets, they have the same characters, but just completely flipped and so body horror-y, gross, gory, that, I mean, it's intentional. It's intentional that you're seeing both sides.
When you go as gross with her body, as you do, you give yourself the grace to go as exploitative sexually as well, because it doesn't, they're equal. She comes out kind of neutral because
it's at least in service of something.
Yeah.
And I mean, and there's also part of it that, like, while there is the very like shiny 80s, fairly exploitative like nudity stuff, there's also just the incredibly vulnerable, like dark, just Demi Moore, like hunched over and staring into a mirror.
There's a lot of sad nudity.
Before there's even any body horror.
Yeah.
It's just like a gorgeous woman in her 50s, but just who's obviously just completely miserable with her body, that even that just gets you.
This movie does a really good job showing outside of the body horror, the horrors of loneliness and aging and
Jealousy and
depression, and without even needing to lean on the body horror for all those moments. Like you just said, there's a lot of points in the movie when it's Demi Moore week and she's on that are like really upsetting and sad and like made me feel truly upset for her. You're just looking at like probably one of the most beautiful women on the planet.
Yeah.
Demi Moore.
And
still,
yeah.
at her 50s, still one of the most beautiful women on the planet who is so upset with how she looks. She thinks she's so ugly. And she has everything. She has this beautiful apartment. She probably has enough money to live on forever. And just seeing her go down this path is like heartbreaking before the body horror even starts. It's really hard to watch.
I'm fine. Everything's fine.
I really liked how Demi Moore's character, it's gonna sound weird, but like, isn't that good a person? And they don't portray her as like this wide-eyed ingenue who's just like been ruined by Hollywood. Like, she is portrayed as, I mean, obviously a victim, but as this fairly vain, immature person.
She's part of the system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they do just enough of that, where it's like, it's not like entirely she brought this on herself, but like there were opportunities to come to terms with aging gracefully that she did not take, and that's how she kind of walks into this.
Yeah.
That I thought was really well done.
People always ask for something new. It's inevitable. At 50, well, it stops.
I was sure that one of the twists, one of the conflicts the movie would bring up was that you run out of substance. That the supplier of the substance cuts you off, and then there'd be this whole angle with the corporation making the substance, or you'd have to start paying, and that would be a conflict?
Right.
That's not, like, all the conflict is because the two versions of Elizabeth are at war with each other. The substance never screws them over.
No, it works perfectly.
It works perfectly. If she followed the rules, it literally would have been fine.
Yeah.
And it all falls apart. And I think that adds a lot to it. By not having an external threat, by not having the substance company be the bad guy.
That's what this does as a B movie, right? I mean, we want Upgrade, right? That's where they go to Aaron Keen's house and get in a kung fu fight. Like,
Yeah.
That's what...
Don't do that.
I think that's fine for certain...
For certain
this
movies.
was just such a better... Like,
It
this is the
elevated
A-plus
it. Yeah.
version.
We didn't need to see the CEO of the substance company explain to her the master plan and how they're using all the data. Like, they don't do that. You never know anything. You don't even see a person. You just hear a phone call in that one little crappy room with the key card. That's all we know about the company. And that's genius. And I love that they left it at that, and all the conflict is internal.
This balance is not working.
Would you like to stop? Would you like to stop? Would you like to stop? Would you like to stop?
Like, within this movie, there's actually very little dialogue. So much of this movie is just people staring, but storytelling so effectively. It's just holding on one person somewhere, but you get so much out of it.
Yeah.
It's just, it'll be one person, but they'll be so, it's just so dense with visual like information and storytelling. Just be Margaret Qualley standing there in front of like a bunch of chicken bones in front of like a billboard of herself in like a skimpy outfit, and it's just like they don't need to talk. You just hear it.
Because there was a point early on where I'm like, do they share memories? And when you realize they don't, I was like, oh, like they don't even know what the other one was up to. That makes this so much darker.
Yeah.
Like the older version isn't even enjoying being a star. The only gratification she's getting is to know that there is a version of her that is a star, but she's not even awake for it.
Yeah.
Which makes that so much more upsetting and dark.
It was, and it was just so deftly done in the way that they let you get there. I mean, again, there's so many points where this could have just become a B movie. And I think I'm failing to come up with the movie that did this, but where they start like leaving sticky notes all over the place, like setting traps for each other and like trying to trick each other. Right? There was none of that.
Yeah.
There's like one scene where she's in the bathroom, like in the shower going like, you have to stop, like basically to herself.
Yeah.
That's kind of it. The rest, like, they just let you get there on your own, that there's this conflict between them.
I had a moment in this movie that I need to ask you about.
Okay.
And it's when she is angry cooking. I thought
love this.
That was fantastic. I thought she was gonna stuff the younger version like a chicken or like a turkey. And I want to know if I was the only one that thought that, or if they were intentionally leading you to think that might be something that she does, because they keep cutting between the young version and the turkey and her fist up it.
And there is the scene where Margaret Qualley like hallucinates
chicken out of
pulling
her
the
stomach.
chicken. Okay, so for a little more, just in case you're not gonna watch it, there's this whole scene where Margaret Qualley is like doing an interview on TV. She's like top of the world, and it's intercut with Demi Moore as this dissolving old witch, cooking her way through an entire French cookbook as an act of rebellion. I took it very much as more of a commentary on like food and this character's relationship with food. I mean, Margaret Qualley is like disgusted with, I guess we can say like Sue is disgusted with Elizabeth for like gorging herself, and that very much feels like a actress in Hollywood thing, right? The relationship with like Demi Moore probably hasn't had a good meal in 30 years.
Yeah.
And this is her act of rebellion about it, and it's sort of the way that they illustrate the conflict between them and the desire to fit in and continue playing the game.
But it also doubles, we were talking about the motherhood thing, she's fully become like an old Italian nonna.
Yeah.
With the red sauce pot and the sauce, like it works thematically in like several ways.
It
Because
was
she
kind of
just
Hannibal-y in the way it was just so like visceral and like gross.
Like the
where
blood
she's-
sausage is
Yeah.
getting cooked and you're like,
But it worked. It was just such a weird, like, okay, how do you illustrate that she's going off the deep end and that she's just like becoming this bitter, hateful old version of herself? Or it's like, let's just have her cook.
have her cook
have it
angrily and it's
gross.
disgusting.
She's just spraying eggs and potatoes all over herself, and
And by contrast, the Sue, the young version, they like make a really intentional point of having her drink, I think, a Diet Coke.
yeah, I don't think she ever eats at
It
any
doesn't
point
eat.
in the
The
movie.
only thing you see is a Diet Coke, and it's clean, and there's the perspiration on the can.
Yeah.
And then you just smash cut that with Demi Moore, like smashing blood sausages and like beating eggs on her face.
This
and
is
all.
just one of those scenes that only 5 directors in the world can come up with like this.
Yeah.
It's Tarantino-y in the way it's like, how did you sit down and think to intercut the Arsenio interview with her just like tearing into a chicken? Like, that's crazy.
Fat. Disgusting.
We've gushed about this a lot. I
Yeah.
guess I'd like to bring up what I guess is maybe my only real criticism, thinking kind of through this movie. And I think this is budget. I think
Okay.
it's kind of partially budget, because we talked earlier about how the movie's very small. It's in like 3 different sets and locations.
There's like 20 extras on screen tops, and only
Yeah.
that a couple of times.
Dennis Quaid's in it, but has like they probably shot all the scenes in like a day or two because he's in very few. So it's super low budget, super small. That worked really well for all the Demi Moore scenes because she's just sad in an apartment eating chicken or going to the studio and failing and having these awkward meetings with Dennis Quaid. It worked really well, and I didn't need more. I think the Sue stuff, where the young version, when it's her perspective, it's this hyper stylized, music pounding, lights flashing, glamour shots.
Yeah.
It works, but it was in the same locations.
Yeah.
It was the same sets, it was the same places, and I think the movie could have improved by seeing Sue engage more with the world. And like, we see her go out for one night of drinks, but we don't know any of the people she's going out with. They're all like extras, basically. She brings one guy home, he has 2 lines. I would have liked to see Sue engage more with the world, which leads to a bigger contrast between her and Demi Moore.
Right.
Because it's like, yes, Sue's like so hot and drinking her frosty cold Diet Coke, and I get it, but she's also like mostly just still in the apartment or at the studio. If you were like, if you got all your youth back, if you were suddenly the young version of yourself, the hottest version of yourself, and you felt amazing, I think there's more to do, more fun things to experiment with her going out in the world and trying new things. Maybe not. I'm not a creative. I think there's an argument to say the fact that she just keeps doing the same thing even when she's young and beautiful.
Yeah.
Maybe that's part of it. But I think the movie did feel a bit stifled in the Sue segments because it was trying to be so over the top and so stylized and like, wow, what an amazing life. But it
Ended up being just a 3-minute video of her twerking. It
Yeah.
was like, this is her.
I could have used more
Yeah, all right.
engagement with that.
I'm Sue. 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 Sue.
I would like to talk about why body horror is a good genre in horror.
Okay.
And I was thinking about this before we watched this movie, and I've now 100% committed to that this is why I feel the way I do. Because I've always liked body horror. I don't know, it's a hard thing to explain to people, especially those who don't watch horror, because it's like, are you just a sicko? Why would you want to watch a little bit, but why would you want to just watch a movie about bodies being horribly mutilated? Fair enough, it's an interesting question. I think the reason is that we talk a lot about how in horror, the thing, I really love this, and I know you do as well, is you don't know what the thing is. I don't want to know what the thing is going into a horror movie. If it's a horror movie and it's supposed to be well made, I want to go in, and I don't want to know that it's ghosts or aliens or demonic possession, right? But most horror movies, it's obvious just from the title and the poster, you can't avoid it. It's like, oh, it's a haunting movie. Oh, it's an alien movie. Oh, it's a serial killer movie. Body horror doesn't have, like, you know there's gonna be body horror in it, but outside of that, there's no motif. There's no thing.
Yeah.
Body horror movies aren't like zombie movies. It's not like there's things that you have to put in it because it's a genre film. The only thing you have to do is have body horror.
And have something bad happen to someone's body.
Yeah, outside of that, it can be about anything.
Yeah.
And I think that's very liberating to a creator that wants to get into the horror space. You can make a movie that both from a plot perspective and from a thematic perspective can just be anything, and you're not tied down to horror tropes or specific subgenres in horror. It's just like whatever. And you go into these movies knowing nothing, and they just surprise you with the weirdest stuff. And I love that experience. And I think that's why I love, and that's why this movie worked, and I think it's why I like body horror movies. I've been watching a lot of Brandon Cronenberg stuff, like Possessor, Infinity Pool, Antiviral.
Yeah.
And that exact sentiment applies to all those movies. Those are all great movies. They're about super weird stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, because he's not tied down to any specific horror subgenres, he can just make a movie about whatever.
Yeah. And I think to that point, this is not in structure. This is not a horror movie.
No.
It's horrifying,
yes.
but this is a lot closer in structure to something like an Alexander Payne movie, right?
It's structured like a comedy.
Yeah.
These beats could be comedic if you shot them different.
This is like, if you lined up, like, this is nothing like a horror movie in terms of the maybe some of them, but in the way that it like plays out. Yeah, that's a really interesting point.
And jump scares body horror films don't tend to have jump scares as much because that's not what's horrible.
Yeah.
The horror is the slow burn stuff. And kind of having this genre where those are all the core principles, I think that's why I'm attracted to the subgenre. That's why it works, is every movie in the body horror genre are so different and unique and thematically diverse, much more so than other areas of horror.
And you get to really make it, the horror part doesn't have to, like, the main goal of it isn't to be scary. It's saying something else, right?
Yeah.
Because like when you've got, I don't know, Jason Voorhees, like the first thing he has to do is be scary to teenagers, right? And then maybe if you're a really good director who's really thinking about it, you can work in like, okay, it's an allegory for child troubles or like whatever, like maturing, like puberty, whatever. But like that's part 2 and that's the hard part. With this, the body horror is the thing.
Yeah.
And it's upsetting because it's something happening to a body, but like its first priority isn't to be scary.
And it supports like 3 themes
that
we've already talked about. It webs into all this different theme work that's going on. It isn't just there for shock value. It has like an actual purpose.
People are gonna love that.
All right, Avery, I think it's time to score this sucker.
It is, I suppose. Who's pick? I think it was my pick, so you have to go first, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it works. Green takes. Write it down.
Green, write that down.
Write it down. What do you critically score this dangle?
This is a little bit tricky.
It is tricky.
I'm gonna go for the critically. For the critically, I am gonna give this movie an A-.
Okay.
I do think, I talked about it very little overall because I didn't want to focus on it, but I do think the breadth, the scope of the film, being somewhat limited by the budget, did hurt a bit of what it was trying to say.
Okay.
In terms of how it executed on Sue's second life, and for that reason, I do think it wasn't perfect. It was like 95% of the way to the absolute vision, but there were a couple things that I think didn't work perfectly, and I also think if you are not a fan of horror, this movie probably does spend too much time on exploitative sexuality and violence that like doesn't trouble me, but I do think it spends a lot of time on it, and I could definitely see it troubling people. I don't know that I'm knocking it down critically for that necessarily, but I would
Sure.
say that
It's not for everyone, for sure.
it's not for everyone. I think I can see the vision for this to have been an A+ masterpiece. It probably needed a little bit more money, but I'm gonna go A-. I don't know how I'm gonna feel about this in a couple days. I could realize I was crazy and it should have been lower, or it should have been an A+, and I can't really figure it out. Which is why personally, I'm gonna lock it into an A.
Okay.
I'm gonna give it an A. It's not an A+ only because I'm not launching this all the way up to my like best of all time must-watch list, but it's as good as it could be without being on that. I haven't had this much fun in a movie theater in forever. It was riveting, it was funny, it was scary and gross. I loved every minute of it. And when I am scouring my streaming services for a horror movie, doing something fresh and new and exciting, this is exactly the movie I want to find.
I had a point, I don't exactly remember where, somewhere 2/3 of the way through, there was a scene going on where I had the thought of, if this movie sticks the landing, this is going to be the first A+ I ever hand out. And then this movie had an absolutely brilliant ending.
Okay.
Critically, I'm giving this an A+. I genuinely
Wow.
cannot think of a thing that, it was just such a feast. That's what it felt like to me. There's just so many different little dishes of things I enjoyed. Like, where any individual movie that I love would have 2 or 3. This had just 10 things that I wanted to dig into and have a brilliant time with. And it just, yeah, I just enjoyed watching it so much. It was just so thoughtfully and well crafted. And for a movie this long at this budget to be really well paced and have this much to say, I'm giving it, it's an A+. This
This is your first A+?
is my first A+, yeah. And that's my critical
Wow.
review. I think this is an A+ movie that not many people will think that highly of, but I defy you to tell me what it did wrong.
I love that.
What it could have done more. And then personally, we're gonna go down to an A. Not down by much. Normally the A tier is rewatch. I almost certainly will never watch this again, so it's a bit of an exception to that rule.
Sure.
I would be like open to it, but I don't really want to.
I would rewatch this.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
But yeah, I get what you're saying.
I got what I needed out of it the first time. It just is hard for me to like say with a straight face that, you know, you got your Over the Garden Wall and your Lord of the Rings and you're the substance.
Yes,
in
I get it.
In my top tier.
Yeah.
I think I could talk myself into it, and maybe in a week I'll feel that, and maybe in a week it'll go down. But for right now, critical A+ and personal A.
There we go. This is probably one of the highest rated films collectively between the both of us that we've ever done on the channel.
They're gonna love that.
Well, we both really like The Substance. I'm gonna go order some myself right now.
Next week you're gonna see super handsome chiseled versions of us, covered in blood with eyeballs and tits growing out of all their orifices.
Thank you so much for watching. We reached a big milestone recently. We hit 1,000 subscribers on
Our-
YouTube.
To our 1,000th subscriber, you know who you are. Why didn't you subscribe earlier?
We thank you all for supporting the channel. 1,000 subscribers is very exciting for us, and we're excited to make a lot more stuff soon. Check out The Substance. Obviously, we both loved it, so it's well worth seeing. And until next time, goodbye.